Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus. Each Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes, or head over to amyrowlandson.com and sign up right now. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Brendan McGurgan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's about time I sort of shared you coming onto my show because you very graciously invited me onto your fabulous podcast. And it's been a while ago now, but as a result of that, lots of people did reach out and ask me to come and speak on their podcast. So I love the ripple effect that you created, and let's hope that I can repay the same kind of wonderful sort of ripple as that you created for me.
I'm delighted to hear that. That's great. And it was one of those conversations that we had that my entire family listened to that because we were on a journey to Donegal, to the west coast of Ireland at the time, and they don't often get to hear the podcast, but yours was one that was on at the car at the time, and everybody fed back so positively about your message then. So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for having me back.
And if I remember correctly, you heard me speak on one of Camilla Long's lunchtime lunch and learn sessions about podcasting and guesting. And you reached out to me and said, hey, this is great. Let's talk. So actually, it was Camilla who created the ripple. So brilliant. Love it.
Yeah, and isn't that the wonderful thing? You know, whenever you're doing something positive and you're positively intended, and, you know, I always say this to the CEOs that I coach now, you know, the transformation that you will make yourself will not stop with you. It'll impact, you know, your relationship with your partner, with your children, with your team, and ultimately their teams as a result, their partners as a result, the community. I mean, it doesn't stop with you. So it's really wonderful when people begin that journey of transformation and share it with others, I feel. So.
And where do you feel your journey of transformation started, Brendan?
Wow, it's happening every day, Amy. I'm 46 now. Certainly the last 2 years has been very profound. I spent 17 years in a business, 12 years of those as CEO. When we scaled that business globally, I went into that business. We had 15 people, and we were delivering revenues of about 3.5 million. There's the accountant coming out on me here. I'm leaning on the revenue numbers, but just to give you a little bit of context, and then we based in Northern Ireland. Most of the business was across Ireland, and then we scaled that business to almost 700 people, realizing almost £100 million revenue, exported the equipment to more than 100 countries, set up offices in 6 continents. So there was a lot of miles, literally and metaphorically, traveled in the course of the 17 years being with that business and 12 years as a CEO. I went in my 20s, kind of helped scale the business as part of the leadership team, then as CEO in my 30s, and then into my 40s. And you're a very different person. When I went into the business, I had just got married. My wife was pregnant with her first child, and she has just let me know today that she's passed her driving test and she's going off to university now. So that gives you, that all seemed to happen very, very quickly. But I've become a very, very different person. I think we are all very different people in our 20s than we are in our 30s, and especially when you've children, when you become a parent, and then into your 40s. So I started to reflect a lot in my 40s as a parent about the impact that we were having on the world. And there was probably a couple of trigger moments. The equipment that we were designing and manufacturing and exporting across the world is used for processing sand and aggregate. Now, I think sand, for those that aren't aware, I mean, sand is used in all aspects of our daily lives. This podcast would not exist without sand. Little quartz chips in our computers are derived from silica sand. The cup that I'm holding at the moment, silica sand. Our telephones, the buildings that we're in, every aspect of our lives is influenced in some way by sand. And we're currently consuming sand at twice the rate in which the world can sustain. It's a finite resource. And after air and water, it's the most consumed resource globally. And what I didn't realize is that we were right at the heart of this industry. And we had developed equipment to not only process natural sand and aggregate more effectively, but also to develop equipment that was capable of processing construction and demolition waste that was previously landfilled. And I recall meeting a lady called Kiran Pereira, and a wonderful young Indian lady who's written a book called sandstories.org. And I had cause to meet her at one of our exhibitions, let's say, one of our conferences. We were hosting a global conference, bringing thought leaders from across the world to discuss the sand crisis. And Kieran stood up and explained how the ecology of the village that she was brought up in had been completely disrupted because of illegal sand mining and the sand mafia. So there's hundreds of people killed globally on an annual basis because of sand, which I just thought incredible. And there was some statistic at that point that after drug trafficking and illegal money laundering, that illegal sand extraction was the most prolific international crime. And I've been operating in this industry at that point for about 12, 13 years, and I knew none of this. And we had the power to really influence what was happening within the industry and help in some way to curb the illegal industry of sand mining. At the same time, and maybe my radar was onto it, but I was reading an in-flight magazine, and this lady called Margot Hoek, a Dutch author, she authored a number of books, a wonderful book called The $1 Trillion Shift. She's an authority on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And she cites in that book the importance of companies having a purpose. And at the same time, I was reading Simon Sinek's seminal book, Start With Why, and I thought, somebody's sending me a sign here, because actually what we're doing in the industry, whilst we hadn't explicitly stated it, is incredibly purposeful, and it can have a meaningful impact on the world and certainly the industry in which we were operating within. That was the catalyst for certainly transforming the purpose that we hadn't articulated a purpose at that stage within the actual business itself, but for me to start reflecting on my own why. And there were a number of kind of other trigger moments on a personal level. I was, somebody I love dearly, quite close to me, had been impacted with their mental health, and I really started to think and consider and reflect, why am I doing what I'm doing, and what's my impact, and as a leader, as a father. So yeah, quite a kind of a number of trigger moments, Amy, I would say, both from a personal perspective and a business perspective, and at that stage, I started to keep a journal, and to a little green moleskin that I still have, and I would document on a very regular basis things that brought me energy. So what I now refer to as radiators, things that brought me energy. And I didn't have this language for it, but at that stage, places, projects, people, things that I kind of got excited about that I may not have reflected on before or not been aware of. and things that drained my energy, kind of what I refer to as drains. And I kept this for quite a number of years and started to build a picture of what it is that I feel that I'm good at. What is it that people will acknowledge me for in terms of what they deem that I'm good at, what I would like to do, and where I can make an impact. And hence that was the trigger after I'd genuinely planned to retire and I'd take an extended period of time off, but that lasted a weekend. And I articulated my own purpose now, which is to inspire, connect, and enable ambitious leaders of SMEs to scale with purpose. And that was the catalyst for establishing, with my co-founder Claire, Simple Scaling, which we did a couple of years ago.
Wow, I love this journey, this evolution that you've taken us on, and I was completely oblivious to what Sand has enabled or empowered or led to in terms of what people will go to get that resource. And wow, I mean, number 2 in terms of the finite resources in the world, but also, as you say, number 3 in terms of the main cause for all sort of evil in that world of what's illegal and what's happening underground. It's incredible, really. I want to take you to, you mentioned the United Nations goals, of which there are 17, if I recall right.
Yes, you're spot on.
Do you have a particular goal in mind out of those?
Now, personally, we have explicitly kind of put out there as part of our own purpose to distribute 5% of our profits across those companies, or 2 companies who are aligned to any of the UN SDGs. For me, when I was operating in the previous business and leading the previous business, we aligned ourselves to 5 of those goals. Part of it kind of responsible infrastructure, gender diversity. But I don't. That in terms of our own business now, we haven't explicitly called any of those out. But actually, the teaching, the coaching around the awareness around the UN SDGs is something that is embedded in our Skillex Accelerator program. We coach now CEOs who are leading businesses on how to scale their business with purpose. And part of that, actually, we bring Marga into the program, and Marga delivers a workshop on the UN SDGs. And it's incredible how many people are not aware of the UN SDGs, and they're a great focal point for companies who are desirous of establishing a purpose and conscious that I think there's a lot of kind of purpose washing out there at the moment. Everybody seems to be jumping on the quick, we need a purpose. If you're genuinely well intended in that regard, the UN SDGs provide a great platform to provide some alignment to what you can do. I mean, it covers all. Good health and well-being is number 1, and I think everybody can relate to that in some way in terms of what they're trying to do from a business perspective. So in short, Amy, no, I don't have. There's not one on a personal level that I'm specifically focused on, but more bringing awareness to those certainly that I'm involved with, the companies and the CEOs that I'm involved with, to bring that heightened level of awareness to the UN SDGs.
And it is really hard because when you look at them, that, as you say, good health and well-being is one, as is no poverty, quality education,
Yep.
and then there's things like clean water and sanitation. And you think, well, how do I prioritize these? Because without clean water and sanitation, the rest just isn't relevant, because we're not going to be alive, because we need water to survive. So, but there isn't any hierarchy here. They are all sustainable development goals that we are looking to achieve, and it's a great way to understand and focus on what you're doing, both personally and professionally. In terms of the scaling with purpose, and you talked about purpose washing, which, oh my goodness, I spoke about that recently, and about how now a lot of companies are having CPOs, chief purpose officers, as part of their business because they want to take control and ensure that they are fulfilling their sort of statements that they've made. What is it that for you talk about scaling with purpose? What is it for you that is the priority of what you want to achieve?
Yeah, so, and let me just take you back just before we leave that previous point for those listening who are leading businesses. The UN SDGs can become quite overwhelming if you're coming to them for the first time. There's 17 goals, as you've rightly articulated. Is there some sort of hierarchy there? With underlying those goals, there's almost 400 KPIs. So if you come to those with the kind of intent of going, we must find 1, 2, 3, 4 goals for us to be aligned to. Where do I start? Almost just use the goals, be aware of the goals. But what I recommend is look for waste within your business, because essentially the goals are all about being more mindful of the use of finite resource. And if you think of kind of that, the providing great employment, essentially the biggest waste of any company's resource is the resource that lies within their people, and the creativity that people have, that intelligence that is wasted on a day-to-day basis because of the lack of effective processes to do mundane tasks, or the culture doesn't lean on people's knowledge, people's creativity, people's desire to want to support a company's aims. They're not asked. And so the greatest waste in any business is the waste of human potential. So start there and say, are we getting people to do, duplication of tasks, and when really there's no need for that, and we can free up somebody's potential in another way. And then look at kind of the different resources. Don't look beyond your own industry to begin with. Just look at within your business and make it really simple. And begin that journey just of trying to eradicate or reduce waste. And that will lead you to 1, 2, 3, or many of the UN SDGs. So I just didn't want to leave that point, Amy. Now I've forgotten your question.
It was about scaling with purpose and what that means. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I've always been committed to growth. So scaling, you can get into the OECD definition from a business perspective in terms of kind of 20% growth year on year, annualized on an average basis over that 3-year period. Setting that aside, scaling is about growth. And I think we're all, without getting overly philosophical, we're all in this planet to grow in some respect. And I think we're naturally wired to do that. So giving yourself scope to grow, orientating yourself intentionally towards some positive purpose is just a good thing. And to say we're not naturally wired to do that. The with purpose is an understanding of the positive impact that you can make. We all coexist in this planet. There's 7 billion, kind of rapidly heading for 10 billion by 2050. It's predicted. We should come to this, again, without sounding overly philosophical, should come to this on the basis that we are stewards of the resources that we have on this planet. As I've articulated with the conveyed in relation to sand, Mother Nature ain't making any more of it. So, when you look at, I have 3 kids, when you look at your kids and go, are we being responsible here with how we're managing the resources that are finite? So scaling with purpose is about, orientating yourself towards growth, but doing it in a purposeful way, making some positive impact, some social impact along the way.
So what's the goal? What's the legacy, the living legacy, and the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my vision now is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of SMEs to scale with purpose. So there's a little nuance between the purpose and the vision, and the nuance is essentially within the vision, it's about millions. And just putting that in, I created what I call a vivid vision, leaning on Cameron Hurl's concept. A number of years ago, I'd sit down along with my co-founder, written out kind of 10 pages of a vivid vision, what I see that we can do within the next 10 years. And that drives now everything that I do, including this podcast, including our own podcast. So the fallout of that vision has been dedicating myself along with my co-founder Claire to write a book over the last 2 years. So simple scaling, 10 principles to 10x your business. That's been quite a journey in itself. The Skillex Insider podcast, which you kindly mentioned earlier on, Amy. We're now in our third, just completing our third season. So I only started that in May. Again, that's been a wonderful, and each of these kind of are wonderful growth journeys for me. I've never written a book. The only thing I'd written previously was kind of corporate emails to all of our employees and some reports. I'd never written a book, and so that was a kind of a process in which I've experienced a huge amount of growth. I've gone on to write, articles that have been published in different professional journals since. The podcast, again, no experience of this whatsoever. Again, that's been a wonderful journey, but all inspired by the vision of inspiring, connecting, enabling millions of ambitious leaders of SMEs to scale with purpose. I began, once I'd retired from the previous business, coaching CEOs on a one-to-one basis. And that was purely because a number of people approached me to say, look, I'd like to pick your brains about what you guys did in there. What I came to realize is that, sadly, less than 2% of the 400 million SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises globally, ever achieve scale. Now, the impact of those, if you take it from a UK context, there are 5.7 million SMEs in the UK. Only 34,000 of those achieved scale in I think it was 2020. They contributed of the 5.7 million SMEs, they contributed £2 trillion worth of revenue to the UK economy, and half of that came from the scale-ups, the 34,000 scale-ups. So if you think of the contribution that scaling companies have on national economies, it's significant. If we can move the needle on that, by 0.01%, that will make a significant impact. So the vision has led to the book, has led to the podcast, has led then, I thought, well, look, this isn't the best leverage of my time on a one-to-one basis. How do I leverage this further? We created a program, a year-long program called our Skillex Accelerator, with monthly workshops and monthly masterminds aligned to the 10 principles of scaling, which we define within our book, in an effort to help more companies scale. And already we're seeing the significant impact of that. We're almost complete in the very first cohort, and all of those companies that have come into the program are achieving, some of them very significant growth as a result of what we've been teaching them throughout the program. So the vision, through the kind of the podcast, the book, the program, the coaching, we're developing an e-learning platform next year as well. Again, it's in an effort to reach millions of ambitious leaders of SMEs in an effort to help them scale with purpose.
And once they do, what next?
Well, my feeling is that's going to keep me quite busy for quite a number of years. If you think, Amy, we're trying to kind of move the needle on the 98% that aren't currently scaling and nudge some of them into the 2%. I think my vision is going to keep me very, very busy for quite some years to come. And along the way, I'm going to challenge myself to do new things that enable that growth to happen. So if you take kind of the last couple of years, there's a subtle acronym within Inspire, Connect, and Enable, which is ICE, and ICE has played an important part of my own transformation. You mentioned earlier on kind of what are some of the defining moments, and one of those defining moments was as part of my own kind of desire to do a little bit more inner work. I went on a retreat to learn the Wim Hof method. I'd listened to a podcast that I'd been signposted to a number of years back in early 2019. Russell Brand was interviewing this Dutch guy called Wim Hof, and he was extolling the benefits of consciously breathing, a special type of breathing, breath control, of exposing yourself to the cold and particularly ice, and actually developing a commitment mindset. So I was just fascinated. I went on a retreat. It was a retreat that lasted 36 hours, and it was the most profound 36 hours in my life. It was just phenomenal. Myself and my wife. My wife had actually taken me on we had planned, it was for a wedding anniversary, and we had planned to go, as we normally do, to a nice spa retreat, enjoy some fine wine and some good food over the course of a weekend. And we were on our way to Cork, and she disclosed the fact that we were going to this retreat center. And I said, oh, goodness, right, okay. I hope there's not too many people there, because I just want to sit in the corner and kind of have a nice glass of wine, read some books over the course of the weekend. She says, well, if it's kind of some news for you, they don't serve alcohol here. It's an alcohol-free weekend. I'm going, oh, no. Well, look, I'm looking forward to a nice steak. It says, well, I've more news for you. Actually, they're vegan. So I said, oh no, this isn't. This doesn't bode well. Turned out to be just an amazing weekend, and through that, then I went then on a week-long retreat, which seen us walk across the cliffs of Moher in our shorts and nothing else, only our boots, in November, whilst there were kind of school trips there, kind of wrapped up in their North Face gear. And that was the kind of the culmination of the week's training to take control of your mind and consciously warm the body whilst you went on this 90 minutes hike across the cliffs. And it was kind of 1 or 2 degrees. And again, kind of that had a profound impact. And I decided, look, people need to know this, and certainly within the business community, my part of what we're doing, we will not have achieved what we've set out to achieve if we're encouraging business leaders to scale their businesses. What I say, kind of encourage them and lead them up Scale Everest. If they reach the summit of Scale Everest and they're broken mentally and physically, if their close relationships are frazzled, and their team are completely also destroyed as a result of the scaling effort, that's not what we're trying to do. So it's so critically important that actually, with our program, and the very first principle of scaling is psyche. They're all P's. The second principle is purpose and vision. The third principle is around people. I'll not get into them all, but the first principle is psyche. And I believe, before you understand or need to understand the mechanics of scaling a business, you need to understand the mechanics of scaling your own mind. And the Wim Hof method is a fantastic way to begin to learn about yourself, taking control of the breath, understanding the power of the breath, understanding the power of cold exposure, and how taking control of your mind through the breath, you can build resilience. Resilience is a word that's overused in business, and I'm often asked, how do you build resilience? Well, the ice and even a 30-second shower at the end of a warm shower is a wonderful way to start to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Scaling a business is hugely challenging. It's why less than 2% of businesses ever do it. But actually, it's achievable, but only if you start to do the inner work. If you commit yourself to to personal scale up before you embark on kind of business scale up. And what we do is kind of hand in hand with the program. Embedded within that is a focus on the leaders, the inner work the leader should commit themselves to in terms of actually building that resilience, creating a robust and resilient mindset in order to kind of overcome the challenges of scaling.
And what this demonstrates to me, Brendan, is a perfect example of the ripple effect, because what happened was you were signposted to listen to a particular podcast episode, and as a result of that you then became aware of Wim Hof, and then your wife booked that retreat. What would have happened to the way that you are working and leading leaders if you hadn't have had those two ripples?
It would have been hugely different. We're doing something that I don't believe has been done anywhere else globally. So I committed to becoming a qualified Wim Hof instructor. So I spent 2 years actually, completed the fundamentals program, then the master's program, and then the advanced program, and then the master's program. I went to Wim Hof's house where his academy is, met Wim a couple of times. An amazing guy. You talk about somebody with a purpose to kind of bring this method to the world to make people happy, healthy, and strong. And that's not just a throwaway remark. That kind of the method leads to happiness by reducing inflammation, helping release serotonin, to health in terms of increasing your immune system, making the immune system more robust and stronger in terms of the actual mindset work. So, it's not, as I say, that it's not just throwaway. Yeah, the Wim Hof method is now embedded within our program. And it was really important to me that whatever we did in the program, I made loads of mistakes scaling the business, loads of mistakes, but was always curious to learn and grow. In fact, when we embarked on our scaling journey, scaling actually wasn't a thing. So it's only entered the business lexicon in the last 7 or 8 years, really. Triggered by a lady called Sherry Coutu, who I had on the podcast recently. She founded a company called Interactive Investor and scaled that. It recently was sold to a company for $1.5 billion. A remarkable lady. And then she founded the Scale Up Institute, or produced the first significant piece of work around scale ups back in 2014. And that was the first time that this word scaling really came into the business world. And so for me, it was really important that in terms of the mechanics of scaling the business itself, that everything that we're coaching within our program, that I have authentically lived. I can eyeball the leaders, the CEOs who come into our program, say, I know if they're turning over 10 million at the moment and struggling in relation to the development of their process. I can eyeball and say, I know exactly where you're at right now. The guy who's coming in, or the girl who's coming in, and she's leading a 30 million revenue business. And again, challenges might be slightly different. Again, I can eyeball her and again, empathize, know exactly where they're at, and say, look, we tried this, and this, it didn't work. This is what worked at that particular inflection point within the business. So the program has been written not from a consultant's perspective in terms of what they feel will work, but from the kind of the years of trial and terror in many respects, of trying things and failing, and then trying again and finding things that worked in our scale up journey. And a big part of that for me has been the work that I've done on a personal level over the last 4 or 5 years from a personal scale up perspective. And the Wim Hof method, I was always big into my sport in terms of, I feel if you're physically healthy, I trained this morning, and immediately you train in the gym, your emotional state changes. For me, it certainly does. I don't think I've ever left the gym and I haven't felt stronger, more focused, more motivated. It just changes my emotional state. Now, I accept that not everyone wants to go to the gym every time they need to change their emotional state. The Wim Hof breathing method will do that with as little as 15 minutes a day of daily breathing exercises. So incorporating that into our program, I feel, is something that's very, very accessible. And actually what we're finding is that business leaders, of those that have come onto our program, have started to incorporate breathing routines into the start of their own meetings. And there's lots of science around that to suggest that people who are in, let's say, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but a parasympathetic state in that meeting access wider portion of their brains than those who are in fight or flight, let's say in a sympathetic, if they're coming into those meetings with a level of anxiety and about the agenda, about something that's going to be discussed, well, then you're only accessing a certain portion of your brain at that point. So, and lots of research to support this. The Navy SEALs, for example, will perform an exercise called box breathing, which they borrowed from pranayama yoga. And that's a very simple exercise to inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And they will do that collectively. There's a great writer called Stephen Kotler, and he referenced the Navy SEALs in his book, Stealing Fire, about their practice of breathing collectively before they went on a very intense mission. And they not only calmed themselves, their biggest challenge is actually not pulling the trigger instead of pulling the trigger. It gets them into a calmer state. And from in terms of them acting as a unit, it syncs them as one unit. So part of the vision is actually to transform what happens around boardroom tables, and for us to sit, or stand before our meetings and just perform a couple of minutes of breath work and make better decisions.
And I love that. And I love the fact that it was also something that Camilla mentioned had really transformed her world with the breathing as well. So it's really, there's a really great synergy here that the people that have brought us together, the person that brought us together has been around breathing, and yet here you are that's shared this incredible journey that you've been on, having sort of almost had that serendipitous moment of stumbling across the Wim Hof method and then being able to bring it into something that's going to create the impact that you're looking for. I love it. It's fantastic. It also makes me think of all the things that are out there that you're not aware of, that you don't know, that could also build on and help you with helping to scale these businesses so that they, you're moving that 2% dial closer to, well, not the 98%, but certainly, the other way. What is it that perhaps you've recently encountered that you're going to be exploring more of?
That's a great question. I was speaking to my own Wim Hof mentor, a wonderful guy called Neil O'Murrough, and I met with him last week. Actually, we went for a hike in the woods here, and we were discussing how to take the breathing a little bit deeper, and something that I plan to explore and certainly introduce to the program is cacao. So having a cacao ceremony. So cacao is just the kind of the extract from cocoa beans. So one of the most potent antioxidants that you'll find naturally, and it's something I haven't tried before. So I'm keen to explore that, and just to take the breath work further than what I'm currently taking it. And also, we plan an expedition next year. It's something that I've wanted to do ever since I'd heard that Wim Hof actually did this. He scaled Kilimanjaro in his shorts and boots, and took people up and down the mountain in less than 32 hours, which previously it was unheard of. You had to train extensively to go up and down Kilimanjaro in, I think, 5 days. And here he was doing it in less than 32 hours in a pair of shorts. And I just think that's incredible. So definitely exploring the cold further. And so the plan will be over the next couple of years to plan a trip like the Kilimanjaro trip, and certainly to take the breathwork a little bit further as well.
Yeah, and I just want to put a bit of a public safety announcement out there. We're not endorsing that you go out and do this. There's a training set process
Uh,
that you need to go through first.
Absolutely, and this is so important because there's a lot of stuff on YouTube at the moment, and we're cautioned as instructors to beware of the YouTube breathers, the people who have seen Wim. I mean, Wim Hof has been exploring his body and where he can take the breath for the last 40 years, 50 years since he was a young teenager, a young boy in Holland, and he first experienced the ice when he jumped into Beatrix Park when it was frozen over, and but he's been on this exploration for 40 to 50 years, and people are seeing what he's doing on YouTube and trying to replicate that, and that's not the starting place, and certainly, the safety around the cold exposure and the breath work to actually overcome the cold exposure is different from the breath work that you'll see around the kind of the specific Wim Hof breathing method. So I'm glad you've raised that, Amy. Yeah, absolutely. Look, but what I would say is everyone can turn their shower to cold for 20 seconds at the end of a warm shower, and over the course of 20 days, increase it, to 25 seconds to 30 seconds, and try for the kind of, we talk about the 20-day challenge, try and take it up to 2 minutes. And there are a host of physiological benefits which occur as a result of you being exposed to the cold. The first is the release of norepinephrine, and that's a wonderful enhancer. It's a hormone and a neurotransmitter, and you'll know this from coming out of kind of I know when we went to the seaside as kids and you come out of the freezing Atlantic on what your mother was trying to convince you was a warm summer's day, and it was maybe only 7 or 8 degrees. You feel attentive, you feel awake, you feel focused, you feel more diligent. And that's all as a result of the release of norepinephrine. And you'll get that from a cold shower in the mornings. We have, which again is incredible, 100,000 kilometers of arteries, blood vessels, veins running throughout our body, which is enough to go around the world 2.5 times. Now, my father has had heart disease, my mother's had heart disease, my grandparents, and so I was very conscious of the things that I could explore to help my cardiovascular health. And cold exposure is brilliant for this in terms of the cold is and norepinephrine is a vasoconstrictor, which means it narrows your veins and arteries. But whenever you start to warm up, you vasodilate. So your 100,000 kilometers of your network, your cardiovascular network, gets a workout going from the cold to the hot. And because we've existed now for so many years in these kind of overheated environments, a lot of our cardiovascular system never gets stimulated. So that's the one thing I would challenge people to try, if they take nothing else from this podcast other than just try and turn the shower to cold for 20 seconds at some stage over the course of today or this week, and trigger a habit which will change your life.
And this is what I love about this podcast, because every conversation around purpose goes into completely different directions. I did not know at the beginning of this episode that we'd be talking about cocoa nibs, and we'd be talking about the benefits of Wim Hof as well. And my husband recently, and he'll be delighted, I can see him smiling now, he's editing the episode right now, because he's been endorsing the cocoa nibs particularly he uses.
Brilliant.
And he's been saying, oh, you try this. And I'm like, yeah, because it increases levels of, I think it's serotonin and dopamine, but which obviously impacts your mood, but it's also against a really good health for lowering risk against heart attack and stroke. I mean, there's loads of benefits, but yeah, absolutely. I recently came back from a weekend or a few days with my husband from Iceland, and we did some thermal sequencing, which involved ice and heat, and it was fabulous. I really, really enjoyed that. Although I do like that moment when you come out of the ice plunge area and then your body tingles all over.
Yeah.
But I do like going back into the warm lagoon again. That's a really nice.
And the thing is, we all do. People will say to me, do you enjoy the cold? Nobody enjoys, an ice bath. People say to me, do you get used to it? You don't get used to it. What you do get used to is the training or the practice of focus before you go into it. But you never get used to the ice. That's what I say. I mean, the cold is a wonderful teacher, because if you're not focused, and it's the same whether you take the method of the breathing that you practice before you go into an ice bath, and that's it would to actually overcome your body's innate fight or flight mechanism. And that's exactly the same practice whenever you've received a difficult email from an employee or a customer maybe, and previously I would have been inclined to react to those. Now I can respond as opposed to reacting. And the greatest lever we have of controlling our emotional state is actually the breath. And it's just so accessible. This is what I find so profound about this. It's just so accessible. But the lack of awareness around is incredible. Now, in saying that, so there's been some wonderful work by the likes of Patrick McKeown, who I had on the podcast recently. He's now written his 10th book. One of those is kind of his seminal works is Oxygen Advantage. But he's got a wonderful book called Atomic Focus, and I encourage your readers. It's so accessible. My daughter read it recently prior to her exams. And James Nestor wrote the wonderful book called Breathe. Again, he unearthed the power of the breath work, which, he references Wim Hof in that, he references Patrick McKeown, he references, other authorities around the kind of the power of the breath in that book. And that's it's a wonderful introduction to the power of breathing. So yeah, it's wow. Who would have thought we've covered the cacao, breathing, ice, sand, scaling. Yeah.
You literally I was just about to summarize. I was going to say, because you started out with the fact that we were talking about the transformation, and the transformation does not stop with you. And you've taken us from sand to ice to cacao to breath, and you've woven into that the purpose, the sustainability, the authenticity, the impact and the growth. And yeah, there we go. This is how as I said earlier, I don't know where these conversations are going to go, but I just listen and we explore and we journey on together. So I just want to say thank you. What a great conversation. How would people get in contact with you, Brendan?
They can email me on bmcgurgan@simplescaling.com. I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only social media platform I'm really active on. So yeah, you'll find me, Brendan McGurgan, on LinkedIn as well. And of course, you can jump onto our website, simplescaling.com, and easily reached.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. How would you like to leave the audience today?
This is a question. So I often ask, well, not often, I ask in every, and I pose the same question to you, Amy, to leave our listeners with 3 timeless takeaways. And the one that comes up time again, which I can really relate to, is own your own experience. So there's no one else to blame for the results that you're getting in your life. If you've difficult relationships, look at yourself, don't look at the other person. If you're not achieving the financial results that you want in your life, again, look at yourself. Don't seek to blame your boss or your company. Look at yourself. If you're, from a health and well-being perspective, if you're not feeling it, again, don't blame the gym instructor. Don't blame the fact that there isn't a gym close, or it's coming up to Christmas, or own your own experience in all respects of your life, from a physical perspective, mental, spiritual, kind of emotional. start with yourself. And it's amazing what happens when you start to look inwards and try to polish from the inside out as opposed to the outside in. So yeah, what I'd say, own your own experience, Amy.
Thank you for listening to Focus on Why with me, Amy Rowlandson. To show your appreciation and to help other listeners understand what value you have received from tuning in today, please leave me an Apple Podcast 5-star review. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.